Hello and welcome back, everyone. Happy Thursday. Today's a very good day in terms of Victoria 3 news for a few reasons, one of which is kind of at the end of this dev diary and you have to read between the lines, but more importantly, we get a double happy Thursday. That is a double happy Thursday, but not only that, happy is capitalized because of course everyone recognizes this as a holiday, which of course is just kind of a great kind of punctuation to leave us off for the end of the year, because this is going to unfortunately be the last dev diary for some time. So there's sad Thursdays to come. People say the holidays are a happy time. We know the truth. We know that they're in fact sad time because the happy Thursdays end. But let's jump right into it. This is going to be kind of the roadmap for what's next after 1.8, which we will have some insights into as to what's coming up in 1.9. As is customary after each major update, we'll be returning to our future plans which we last went over in Dev Diary 124. Just like the previous times, we'll be going over what changes and improvements we have planned for the game in future free updates, such as 1.9 and 1.10 and beyond. Now, for me, this Dev Diary has like a lot of like weird spots where you read between the lines. I don't know if 1.10 is going to be a free update, but the fact that they're listing this as a free update to me implies that the next DLC, like at the earliest, is going to be in the summer, which is kind of maybe not what I was hoping for, but I also think based on some stuff we'll get to a little bit later, I don't think they're actually holding back content, which I think that I have mixed feelings about. So what I mean by holding back content, I mean they are working on systems that they are planning on putting in full paid DLC, and the way that this would happen, or the way that this would end up, is we would get these light or bridge patches in between, and then these really fat DLC patches, which I think I would kind of prefer the really fat DLC patches, not because I want to be strung along with tiny little patches and then have a monstrous patch. I'd rather have big patches all throughout, but I think it's easier for the game to be more successful and build hype with really big patches and this type of thing, and I think it would be better for the long-term like game health as well as ability to attract new players, stuff like this, rather than having medium-sized patches. Instead have small patch, little patch, or small patch, big patch, small patch, big patch. And what this one, I was thinking 1.10 was going to be a big patch, 1.9 is going to be a small patch, but as we'll find later, they're saying that 1.9 is going to be a big patch. And so I don't, I think as a player, I think I like this pacing. As someone who cares for the health of the game, I think I dislike this pacing, but we'll get into it. Once again, we will be talking about the same key four elements of military, historical immersion, diplomacy, and internal politics, as well as other, for anything that falls out of those four categories. Those are 5 categories, my guy. Other is in fact categorized / otherize others. Okay, just as before, I'll be aiming to give you an updated overview of where we stand, where we're headed, and where we're heading by going. We do head by go, that's true. Generally, when I'm going somewhere, I'm also headed there. Through each of these 4 categories, and making each of one of these, and marking each one of these ones of the below statuses. Man, I tried to read that sentence too fast, like 5 times in a row, and just ended up like not reading it like at all. Done. This is part of the game that we now consider to be in good shape. Something being done, of course, doesn't mean we're never going to expand or improve on in the future. It's just no longer a high priority for us. Any points we've already marked as done in previous updates will be removed from the list to avoid it growing unmanageably long. That makes sense. But for those of you who like don't remember the long history, there's a lot of things that have been removed from here because they've already been improved. But you can look at older dev diaries like 79, 89, 102, and 124 if you're interested in what we have had done previously. Updated. This is part of the game that we have made some improvements and changes on that we want to make, but not yet satisfied with where it stands, and plan to make further improvements to it in the future games. Not updated. This is part of the game where we haven't released any kind of planned changes / improvements in any currently released updates, but we're planning to do so in future updates. New. This is, of course, new. Reconsider. This is a plan we previously changed or implement, but have reconsidered our approaches to how to tackle from previous updates. I don't think I recall seeing reconsidered on any of these. For these points, we'll explain what our new plans are and change the list appropriately in the future updates. For a final bit of repetition, I'll repeat myself, because listen carefully, because I will never repeat myself, so I will say for one final bit of repetition, just to repeat myself, just as before, we will only be talking about improvements, changes, and new features that are part of the planned free updates in this dev diary. So here, I guess, is a little bit of a rejoinder to the point where maybe they are holding some stuff back. I think that the fact that later on they say that they can't really talk about specifics as to what's improved or what they're working on, to me implies slightly that they're not holding back content, but they could be holding back content. I will remind you that this is not an exhaustive list of the things that we are going to do, and that something being done doesn't mean we're not going to bug fix, balance, or make UX improvements on it afterwards. Alright, on to the dev diary proper, as one does after a preamble. Okay, so we see, and I'm just generally a fan of this infographic, we are going to see probably much of the same type of content, much of the same descriptions. We see make sure that supply is important and meaningful part of the military system that could win or lose you wars. We see it up here, so we're going to just go off of the infographic because it's going to have like the exact same sentences, because the infographic is prettier. Shout out to infographics, shout out to the infographic team. We see under military, this is by far the biggest category, and this is something that they expressed last dev diary is what they wanted to work on most. Make sure that supply is a meaningful supply is important and meaningful part of the military system that can win or lose you wars. I suspect, or I hope, and I'm going to be making, I think, a bit of a video essay on the way I want to see the improvements implemented, that for supply to be important in a way that really makes sense, there's going to need to be a logistics system that includes stockpiling, and I believe that the same logistics system is going to be necessary for making navies, and I think there's in here somewhere, turning individual ships down here, turning individual ships into proper buildings of military hardware that can be built, sunk, and repaired. I believe that the same type of system you would use for stockpiles, you could use for making individual ships, pieces of military equipment. And at that point, if you already have military equipment, it will be a lot easier to implement a supply system that doesn't seem wildly chaotic and like you can impose really harsh penalties without having it be... I think the problem with imposing harsh penalties before is sometimes you would just lose market access for a second or something like this, or lose access for a second, and it really wouldn't necessarily be the case that you should suffer this super harsh penalty. Now, if your individual units have a stockpile of their own, of weaponry and equipment, they can be cut off from access for a little bit, but once those supplies run dry, and maybe you want to have it where they run out of supplies of the first 50% really fast, and then they start, rationing their supplies, and the last 57 or 50% runs out really slow, like some sort of logarithmic thing, where they slowly lose fighting capability, and they also slow down the rate of consuming their supplies. But I imagine you would want to use a similar type of system, and that this might be what they're looking for. Tweaking and improving the frontline system to eliminate excessive fruit splitting and teleportation. I think that this has been on the list before, and then it had gotten taken off the list. I actually can't recall. This is something that has always been a critique. I don't know to what extent some of these systems are fixable, because I know that they've tried to fix them in the past. And I think it's a difficult issue with the way that they just have, or the system that they're trying to implement, the frontline system that they're trying to implement, might just always have these types of problems. But the teleportation one in particular is really, really, really frustrating. And so I think that there are perhaps stopgap band-aids that I would like to see on the system, perhaps more than hoping for an overall fix. I think that someone had suggested this in a comment, but I would rather have my unit, when it teleports, not teleport back to the home HQ, but instead teleport to the nearest HQ. right? And so when the system fails, I would rather have it be a higher quality fail if that was possible. But I am not as optimistic that this is going to get done. But then again, 1.7, I wasn't optimistic that performance would be improved, since every patch before 1.7 performance had gotten worse, and performance was better in 1.7 and it's even better in 1.8. So go figure. Making navies more important for protecting global power and securing control of coasts. This is something I have some ideas for how I think it should be implemented. Again, we're going to probably make a video essay for this, especially if like demand for that is high. If you guys want to see that type of thing or that type of content, please let me know. But this is something I think that Great Britain was really powerful, during the time period known as the Victorian era. Yeah. And a big part of that was Navy. Right now, Navy is really underwhelming in terms of you wanting to play and lean into the Navy. And I have some ideas on how to fix this. But Great Britain, even though they're the strongest country in the world, they should probably be even more strong than they are. There should also be, I think, a change to technology, which isn't anywhere in the scope of any of this, which would make Great Britain fall off at the end of the century, which is what had happened historically as a result of them kind of falling behind in industrial efforts. Part of the reason being that they were ahead initially, and a lot of the things that they implemented first, a lot of the technology, they had implemented technology that was now outdated, and updating at slightly outdated technology is more expensive than just implementing new technology in its kind of initial thing. Like an example of which being, like in Asia, a lot of the trains in Asia are nicer than the trains today. Are nicer than the trains in Europe or the USA, because when they lay the tracks initially, they give themselves a lot more space and they can do bullet trains and stuff like this, and redoing all the infrastructure would be more difficult than doing it the first time the right way or with the newer sorts of technologies. And so this is one of the reasons why Great Britain fell off. But the way that they fell off is they switched from being the industrial nation to providing freight and finance. And this is not reflected in game at all. In fact, UK suffers with convoys more than anything else. But this is a bit of an aside, and we're probably talking a little bit too much about our kind of ideas. So let's continue with the dev diary. Adding a proper system of military access and finding solutions for other remaining rough edges in the frontline system. Honestly, my brain at this point has like started to filter out the fact that military access does not exist in this game. Initially, this was something that was super frustrating coming from EU4. But now, like, in my head, it's just, like, not even something I think about anymore. But it's absolutely something that should be in the game. You know, if Austria declares war on the Papal States, I don't think they share a border. If not the Papal States, some Italian minor, like two Sicilies or something like this, Austria should just march through the peninsula and just crush them. But as it stands now, they just need to defend the coasts, and then they're like perfectly fine. And one of like Great Britain's advantage of being on an island should be even better because they're really easy to defend. But currently, like Austria and France can't really beat Austria in a fight very easily at all, because they can't march their armies over there, and landing Austria is too hard. And so there really should be a military access system. Reduce the number of early game total wars between great powers. This has been on the list for forever. I don't know necessarily how you do this that much. And I honestly would kind of like to see this alongside an escalatory system towards a World War I. This is, to me, is like a really low priority, but that would be kind of neat. Okay, so this is kind of the military section, which for many people is the most important section. On to historical immersion. Improve and add to base game journal entries and events and ensure that they feel meaningful and impactful. I think that this will just always be on here. I can't imagine you just like ever take this off. This kind of just seems like, yeah, we want to make content for the game. So that makes sense. Add more country, state, and region-specific content to enhance historical flavor of countries. This seems what they're doing. Again, this seems one that will probably never get removed. But also, I think that initially their like design philosophy, it seems that they're changing their design philosophy a little bit. Where initially they wanted it to be completely sandboxy and not have one nation have any bonus over the others, and it seems like they're moving away from that a little bit. Maybe I'm just like a little bit missing the point here. But it seems that they are moving away from that because it's really hard to make flavor that feels meaningful and impactful without giving bonuses that are unique. And so I think they should just like lean into it and have more unique bonus and more differentiation because that would improve replayability. But I also am just like heavily biased with over 3,000 hours, where replayability to me is like something that's probably way more important than the average player. Make the AI succeed more at content such as the Meiji Restoration, Alaska Purchase, etc. This has been marked as complete. The AI, if you play Japan now, the AI really likes to open you like a coconut. And so they are very aggressive about, opening Japan, and then once Japan is open, getting into the Meiji Restoration is much easier. AI is really aggressive about pursuing the Alaska Purchase if you've played like either side of, or if you played as Russia, like USA gets really aggressive about it. So you see it happen a lot in these types of things. On to diplomacy. Improve the treaty port mechanic and create more ways for countries to cooperate, compete with, and exploit others using trade. Super excited about this. I have some ideas that are in line with this. I was very delighted when I read this yesterday because I did get the dev diary yesterday, although we are recording today because it would be sacrilegious of me to wish you a happy Thursday on a Wednesday, except I've done it before. Sorry, guys. Improving the war system to be much clearer UX-wise about what is needed to contest war goals. This would be fantastic, especially when you are putting the war goal in that you have to lock in at the start of the war, which is kind of a stupid system anyways. But okay, if we are going to have to lock in war goals at the start of the war, would be really, really great if we would know what we have to take in order to do that. And less all or nothing in terms of when countries are on track to capitulate. Yeah, this would also be an enormous improvement. The tick below zero system, as it stands, is just I don't know why they have it that way. Probably because they just want they didn't want wars to auto enforce, and it was a bit of a problem. But the way to solve that is to change the way war score ticks instead of just have this line where wars just never end. But it makes it so that you can like defend wars you have no business defending and simultaneously be unable to win wars you absolutely should win. And the tick below zero system just like does not seem to be a manifested implementation of anything seeming remotely historic. And it seems to be like a band-aid over a system. And for me, the diplomatic play in its entirety, the declaration of the diplomatic play, the swaying of the diplomats, the other countries, the resolution of the diplomatic play, as well as the way that the diplomatic play ticks, for me is the thing that most critically needs to be fixed in the game, and has kind of been my opinion on what I would want to see fixed for a really long time now. And so This brings me hope. The less all or nothing in terms of when countries are on track to capitulate does seem to indicate that they are addressing at least one portion of the diplomatic play. Allow peace deals to be negotiated during a diplomatic play. Also another improvement. This has been on here for a while now, I think. I'm not sure exactly how you implement this. Really kind of specifically, I think if a country sways to join against you, like let's say I'm Egypt and I'm fighting the Ottomans and France sways in for conquer Sinai or something like this, I think I as Egypt should be able to give Sinai to France to just get them out of the war. And as it stands right now, you can't do that. And so there's really kind of, it can be very frustrating when someone sways for a particular thing that you would be more than happy to give them, like ban slavery in one of your subjects, and you end up having to fight this huge war. Now, they could just want to fight you anyways. This could be the case, but just like looking at the UI and looking like, oh, they just want to ban slavery in one of my subjects, but now I have to fight them for this like ridiculous thing that I'd be willing to give them anyways, just feels really bad. Also, I think that there should be the way that escalation works as a timer, rather than just like a simmering, uncertain type of feeling of unease between the two countries, I think it just shouldn't be a timer. But this is, and if it's not a timer, and if things are just escalating slowly, and like it feels like this is going to boil over, kind of like using metaphors. A countdown, in my opinion, just like doesn't quite make that much sense. And it would be nice to see if you could escalate things, and escalation causes infamy, and you have to escalate in order to declare a war. And if you just declare a war immediately, which is available to you, it costs way more infamy or something like this. And so such that there's incentive to like escalate and try and diplomatically maneuver, so you could save on one of the resources you have, which is infamy, which is kind of like your public standing. And so you try and declare wars in a way that is useful for public standing, and then you can enforce wars, whatever war goal you want, at the end of a war. But if you take stuff other than what you said you're going to take, it causes a lot of infamy. Stuff like this, I think, would dramatically improve the diplomatic play. But the diplomatic play should perhaps just not be a timer counting down. And if that were the case, you could negotiate peace deals. You could ramp up pressure where it makes it look more and more and more like you're going to go to war, when you actually don't plan on going to war, because you want to negotiate a peace separately if there weren't some sort of countdown like mechanic. And so that's kind of how I would want to see that improved. And I think that'd be a huge improvement to the diplo play, but we'll see what we get. Make declaring and holding on to diplomatic interests more rewarding. I agree with this. I don't actually have too many thoughts on it, though. Okay, so internal politics. Internal politics and economics almost seem like the two things that they kind of really switch back and forth between, in terms of what their features are actually geared towards and what they actually do. But let's get into it. Turning legitimacy to more interesting mechanic. Fair enough. Introduce concept for national pride, which ties directly into legitimacy. Would love for they've added so. They're starting to add cultural elements, and I think that this is one of the huge improvements of 1.7 specifically, is that pops used to only care about their material conditions. They used to only care about what profession they had, and yeah, actually, that's like pretty much it, and like how much money they have, basically. What type of profession and how rich they are. And those two were kind of tightly correlated anyways. And, also their literacy. But now they care, about race, and they join political movements. They care about race and religion. And this introduction of, national pride will add another layer of things that the pops care about. And I think as you add layers of like culture on top of just the material conditions, that the game will get more interesting, especially if there's payouts for having particular types of things. Like, for example, I think when you're at war, if your country's not very nationalistic or doesn't have a lot of nationalistic pride, you should probably develop a lot more radicals. And if they have a lot of nationalism or nationalistic pride or jingoism, which is a whole nother layer, then you shouldn't develop a lot of radicals by being at war. And that if your country is very jingoistic culturally, that should probably hurt your ability to engage in diplomatic relations with other countries. And so there should be some sort of trade-off for this type of thing, and rewards for having a country with a particular type of culture that move in kind of different directions. This would be interesting to me. I'm very excited to kind of see the start of that with the racism, and we will see what else we are able to get on top of that. Add laws that could expand on the diversity of countries and introduce new ways to play the game. This would be fantastic. I think that there's perhaps kind of newish ways to play the game, but it also might just be the case that it's not really solved. I think that, the amount of discrimination you have and the amount of population you have now kind of informs, I think, to some degree, what you want your citizenship laws to be, and it's not just always multiculturalism. I think you probably do that if you're going to be dependent on migrants, but you don't do that if you're a country that starts with a lot of population. There's only 3 countries that maybe have enough population where you don't want to do that, and that would be if you're playing India and you already have formed India, China and Japan, something like this. But overall, it doesn't. I'm not sure. We would have to see entirely new categories of laws, I think, to really expand some of the flavor, because I think a lot of the stuff that's effective is kind of just like locked in as being not like conditionally best, but just generally best. Like laissez-faire is just like better than the other systems in terms of economics, and it's not close at all. But I think that a way to do that would be this like national pride and like jingoism, and adding cultural elements where maybe if you are a highly jingoistic country, it makes more sense to have professional army, and then if you're like a more pacifist country or non-interventionist country, maybe it makes more sense to have national, or not national militia, the one where you raise up armies. I forget what it's called. It escapes me, but the one where you are more conscript oriented, something like this. And we have find a better solution for ways that ideologies appear, attract followers, and create support for reforms. Really do like the changes. That's what we got from 1.7. Big nice. Have discriminatory status not be a purely binary status. They fixed it. Big nice. And then we have other. Deal with the fiddly nature of trade systems in large economies, possibly by autonomous trade. For me, this is not necessarily a super high priority, but a lot of people really want autonomous trade. So, okay. Improve on companies by turning them into actual actors in your country that can be expanded. Buildings and interact with characters' politics. They kind of have this starting to be going, but with its current implementation, I'm not that pleased with it, but it's like a step in the right direction. It's simultaneously a step in the right direction because I think that they have to have it like be local and stuff, but simultaneously I prefer 1.7's implementation to 1.8's. I think in a couple spots I said 1.7 instead of 1.8. But I do think that, as it stands, the fact that the buildings are not separated by company versus non-company owned, and all of them get the bonus, to me is just like, they do it for performance reasons, and they can't separate the buildings because of performance reasons, because adding a whole bunch of different buildings, having tooling workshops category A and tooling workshops category B doubles the amount of pops you have to keep track of, right? And then that's not even including the fact that you could have different companies with a different throughput bonus in the same state. So you could have 5 different companies all on tooling workshops in the same state if you like allow foreign investment, and that would just create a performance mess, and that's like not possible. And if they aren't going to do that, then there's I don't know how exactly they fix the system, but there's some weirdness, and I think there's a lot of interesting things they could do with companies, and they're moving the right direction by having them be separate entities. But the implementation right now, just like I'm not a huge fan of it, and so I would love to see them improve it. But I also think that you have to go through where we are in order to get to the next spot. I just kind of wish that they just held the feature back in development, and just we had 1.7 companies instead, and the feature was when they were like, okay, it's not quite ready, we're gonna put it back in the oven for a little bit longer, something like this. Okay, so that's all the features, and that is going to be the entirety of this here. So we're just going to scroll through it and come to the bottom. An update, what we made companies into more distinct entities with headquarters and ownership by specific buildings. We plan to continue developing these. Is that actually different than what the text they say here is? Oh, the notes are a little bit different. All right. If they have the subnote, it's going to be different. But they don't have too many subnotes, so it doesn't look like these are necessarily too big. And so we kind of have our little bit of an outro here, where we have some lines to read between. As per usual, I'm not able to make specific promises about when all these improvements come out. Of course, you have to cover your ass. That sounded perhaps more like shade throwing than I meant it. You just like the people just like foam at the mouth when developers do something other than what they said they have to do, and this is why we can't have nice things. This is why developers can't say I think we're gonna do it here, and then they can't deliver for whatever reason, and then people foam at the mouth, and then they're like, okay, well I guess we just can't say things. And I would rather people not freak out and them be able to say more things. But I could say that, speaking of not being able to say things, the next update, 1.9, is going to be quite a large update that should tackle several points on the list. I was under the impression that it was just going to be a bridge update focused only on military, and this is not what we're going to see. And so I not only think that this patch is probably going to be pretty far off as well, and that the two particular focuses on it will be trade and improvements to the frontline system. I am a little bit disappointed to not see Navy in here, because I think a lot of the fixes for Navy and fixes for trade have a ton of overlap. So I kind of think that you need to fix these at the same time. But I did make a video on why I think trade is kind of busted right now and doesn't really allow for specialization. If you wanted to check it out, it's this one here, how specialization is broken in Victoria 3. But it does seem that they are kind of increasing the prioritization of trade. Trade has, for those of you who are less familiar with like the kind of historical development of Victoria 3, trade has been bad for like a year and a half now. Trade used to be really, really powerful before 1.5, and then what really killed trade was a combination of like two things. They really nerfed the amount of convoys you got, like really, really substantively. Like they really cut down on the convoys. And one of the reasons I think that they did this is that trade really negatively affects performance. And so if you decrease the amount people trade, then performance is not as negatively affected. But the big part is just having different routes. And so you can still have a bunch of routes without convoys if you have land adjacencies. But the second thing is that Mappy really brutalized trade. Because, the value of trade happens at the margins, and what happens with Mappy is, that's market access price impact. When you introduce the local prices affecting things, it eats into specifically the margins, and so it just crushes trade. Trade used to be an absolutely, like, integral and super important part of Victoria 3 before then, and now it's, like, really not. What you used to do is you used to push iron and tools really, really, really aggressively, and export them so you could push economies of scale and throughput and this type of stuff and really have a bit of a advantage in those things, because once you develop the throughput, then you could produce the thing way cheaper than everyone else, and so you would be throughput chasing at the very beginning of the game. And that entire play pattern's like very, very much muted now. It's still somewhat present in that if you have like 35 size buildings, you really want to push them to 50, but trade as it stands right now just feels really bad for a variety of reasons. I'm going to make a video on it, so I won't get, or I've made a video on like why it feels bad. And I'm going to make a video on how I think they could improve it, so we're not going to get too into it. But I'm excited to see trade be on here too. Last week they said it was going to be a military fix patch. Now we're seeing trade on it. I think I would have rather seen just a military fix patch, kind of referring to like my earlier statements where I would rather this be a small patch and then have a big patch that's a DLC patch. I would rather see like that sort of thing. But what this implies to me is that we won't be getting a DLC till 1.11. But okay. For a bit more detail on the later point, I referred to you last week's Dev Diary, where I went over what I consider to be the most pressing issues with the frontline system, all of which we're aiming to fix or at least improve for 1.9. I think if they can't fix it, which I think is a very real possibility, because I think that they've said that they were going to kind of like work on it and fix the front spaghetti. The front spaghetti being fixed has been in very nearly every single one of their we're going to try and fix this things for as long as I can remember. So I'm not sure it's getting fixed. But I would prefer them to, when its system fails, have this fail be a higher quality fail, rather than trying to eliminate all front spaghetti. Make it so that if the front spaghetti happens, it's somehow not as bad. Would be kind of maybe a way of approaching it. I don't know. If they could just outright fix things, then like fix them. But okay. Right, then that's it for today. Of course, I'm going to wish you a happy Thursday at the end of here, because everyone knows that Thursdays that are happy come in double happies. Salutations belong at the beginning and the end. And a wrap, and in fact, a wrap for 2024. We'll be back, or I'll be back. I'll be back. No more happy Thursdays until January 16th to give you a retrospective of the entire year, what we think we went well, what we could do in the future, and see if I can find some fun dev moments from the year to share with all you guys. See you then. So, that's it. That's the last Happy Thursday for quite some time. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe. I do think I am going to make a video specifically on how I think some of these systems should be implemented, especially because I have quite a bit of time before they actually start working on it, because they're kind of going on winter vacation. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, like, comment, subscribe, etc. Mostly etc. Hit the notification bell. That's the YouTube algo thing I should be saying. It's the one I'm not saying. Yeah, the truth hurts. And have a happy Thursday.